Hello and welcome back to In the Field with Redwood Ag. Today's video will be a simple video on the proper startup and shutdown of the oxyacetylene system. One of the first steps is to make sure our regulators are backed off from the previous user. I can do this by making sure it's loose and that the output gauge is set at 0. I do the same thing with the oxygen regulator. It's backed off, gauge at 0. The next step is to start with the acetylene cylinder. The acetylene cylinder valve, turn it on half turn. The reason for half turn is if there's a problem with flame anywhere in the system at any time, you can quickly shut off with a half turn. So half turn on. Once it is on, I will dial this regulator up, and today I'm going to take it to 5 psi by the indicator needle. And because my regulators are a little old, I give them a little tap. There we go. Next we'll go to the oxygen cylinder. The oxygen cylinder valve needs to be seated in there for the high pressure nature of it. So oxygen cylinder valve gets turned on all the way. When you turn it on all the way, you take it all the way up till it stops. If you're ever not sure, you can look at the top of the valves and it says open with an arrow and closed with an arrow. But now we have this one open all the way. When you get all the way open, you don't need to muscle it. You can just stop. After that, we will set our oxygen pressure by turning the set screw on the regulator. And for today, we're going to take it up to 30 psi. Now that we have all the cylinder system on, it's time to go to the torch. One of the first things you do when you have the cutting attachment on is you go to your valves on your torch and you realize that you're going to adjust your oxygen here with this valve and your acetylene with this valve. You need to take the original oxygen valve of the torch body and turn it all the way on. What this does is it lets you have oxygen power to your cutting bar without adjusting oxygen yet. Now you're ready to start the torch. So as we go to start the acetylene flame, with our thumb and forefinger we crack the acetylene valve and strike it. I'm going to turn that up to where I have what I call a feathery flame. A little bit of smoke's okay. The big trick is we don't want the acetylene flame to jump away from the tip. Too much acetylene would look like this. And we would get a gap between the tip and the flame. If that's the case, we turn it down till that gap goes away and we add in a little bit of acetylene right there until we have a clean flame. Now we're going to add in oxygen. Oxygen is going to greatly change the characteristic of our flame. We're going to add it in slowly. We have a big blue column. We have a long feather or a long feather and an inner cone. You want to slowly add in until that feather comes up and disappears into the inner cone. At that point right there, I usually fully depress my cutting bar and see if the flame changes. If it does, I can hold down my cutting bar and readjust to where the feather is just touching the flame. And that is a perfect neutral flame. You will always know if you go too far and get an oxidizing flame by two ways. First of all, a whistling sound. And secondly, the cones get overly pointed. So if that's the case, you would back off, press down, adjust. You want no change in the cones from preheat flame to cut flame. When it's time to shut the torch down, you always go to the acetylene first, oxygen second. The theory there is you've taken away the part that is flammable, and then also oxygen has flowed through the torch for an extra second or so, letting the dirty oxygen gas blow out of there and keeping your torch cleaner. I want to illustrate a little better look at that flame. First of all, when the acetylene flame came out, I was looking for that Long, feathery flame, just maybe a little bit of smoke, but not much. I want to listen to it and make sure it's not too loud, and I definitely want to make sure that it hasn't jumped away from the tip. I don't want a gap here, okay? If it's a gap, I have to turn down a little bit until I'm all the way against the torch. Then, as I start adding in my oxygen, this column will change. It'll turn into a long light blue column, and you will start to see a feather inside there of a different shade of light blue. And then you'll start to see the little cones in here by the tip. As you increase your oxygen, this feather shrinks down. It keeps shrinking down, and you want to stop and be at a neutral flame when that feather shrinks down and touches, when everything touches right there at the cones. That is your neutral flame spot. Then a reminder, I fully depressed the cutting bar and readjusted to make sure it wasn't what I call fuzzy right here. Okay? And that is the perfect neutral flame. That is a perfect mixture of acetylene and oxygen, and the torch won't pop at you and do all these random things that you're like, man, something's out of adjustment here. That's a great way to do it. Okay? And so that's a little better look than what we could see on the camera looking at it there. All right, now it's time to shut down the system. We're done with the job for the day. Our valves are off, and it's time to shut down the system. Let's go to the system for shutdown. Starting with the acetylene cylinder, we'll shut the valve all the way off. Next, we go to the oxygen cylinder and we shut this valve all the way off. Once again, if you don't know which way to go, on top it says close with an arrow. When you get down on these valves, you want to go just snug. You do not need to Superman these, just snug. Next, we come to the torch body, and it's time to bleed the lines. I always bleed acetylene first because it's a dirty gas and I want to use the oxygen to clean it out. So acetylene first, let it run till the system is taken care of. Oxygen second. It's empty. Lastly, I want to back off the acetylene regulator, a couple of turns, and back off the oxygen regulators. We can also note that when we're right here, the output needle on the gauge reads 0. It's completely shut down. One of the last things I like to do is take care of our equipment so it's ready for us for next time. I usually, with no kinks in the hose, will wind up the hose, gently take care of the torch, and take care of this for the next time we're ready to use it. This was just a quick video on startup, neutral flame, and shutdown for all you folks out there. Thank you for watching In the Field with Redwood Ag. We'll see you in class.